All right, guys. Welcome to the Thanksgiving week head coach episode. I'm here with Yanni. What's up, dude?
What's up, everyone? Happy Thanksgiving. Good luck in your fantasy matchups. Weird schedule this week.
Yep, weird schedule. We're definitely in the crunch time of fantasy season for 16 playoffs. We're in the second to last
Mhm.
week of the year, and we have no bye weeks for the first time since week four, I want to say.
Mhm.
So we got a full slate this week, a lot of games, and well, I guess we'll just get into them. I'll let Yanni start because he is our resident Packers homer. I mean, Lions homer. Sorry, you don't like the
Yeah,
Packers.
I would say Lions homer. I do have like an affinity for the Packers. I like LaFleur. I like their players. So for the Packers, they're going to the Lions with an implied team total of 23. The Lions with an implied team total of 25.5 at home. The Lions have been like an offensive wagon in domes or at home this year, so we're expecting a pretty good showing for them again. On the Packers side, Love has been one of these guys that you don't want to start in tricky matchups. You do want to start in better ones, whether those are better ones where they're going to have to pass a lot or whether those are better ones with a softer defense. The Lions are actually pretty good defensively this year, but their passing defense is vulnerable. They're more so good against the run. So I'm totally comfortable streaming Love as, if you have your two QBs and you've been rotating them out, I think Love is a perfectly fine start this week, especially with the projected game script. Josh Jacobs taken off the injury report. You're going to start him. You're never sitting him. We saw Emmanuel Wilson have like a crazy week. I got really lucky. I was going against Josh Jacobs in 3 games last week, and I ended up going against Emmanuel Wilson in none. So him missing was a pretty big swing, but he's back, no injury designation. You are starting him. And then Christian Watson. Christian Watson is currently occupying the X receiver role for the Packers. He is getting the most consistent usage on the team, even over Romeo Dobbs since he came back. Dobbs has had drop issues since he came back. But in terms of air yard share, first read share, target share, like Christian Watson's getting really healthy usage. He's been, a borderline wide receiver 2 and 3 most weeks. He did have one spike week. I think this is a really good bet for him to have a spike week here. Like I have a roster that lost Drake London. I'm going to go ahead and roll Christian Watson. And then Dobbs. Dobbs is a sort of tricky decision. Again, with no buys this week, I think you guys can do a lot better, but that's what a sort of tricky decision is. Like, I know that a lot of people had been riding him for a while. I would look elsewhere, even though the conditions are really ripe here for good scoring. And I think if you need to plug him in, if he is your best option, it's not like a disaster, but I would work around him personally. For the Lions, we have this ridiculous concentration that has happened since Dan Campbell has taken over. Jahmyr Gibbs is actually rising to the level of snap count he was at after David Montgomery got injured last year. And Jahmyr Gibbs looks like he is slowly pushing into, I don't know if he can catch Jonathan Taylor. He's actually not that far behind him right now. We'll see how things go over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Whatever happens there, I think he's a locked and loaded top 3 running back rest of season. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown has really built up his usage as well since Dan Campbell took over play calling. I know all the focus was on Jamison Williams, but slowly but surely, especially since Laporta went out, these two guys are really soaking up a huge amount of the touches there. So their starts. We're going to sit Montgomery. Tough rushing matchup. Monty is getting like sub 40% of the role there. He's not getting subbed in on the goal line. We saw that last week with that Jahmyr Gibbs receiving touchdown. It's just not going to be something that I think you can start. I think he's probably the highest upside handcuff in all of the NFL because if Jahmyr Gibbs goes down and Monty gets the full role, he's a locked and loaded top 8 guy, but he's just not right now. So he's a sit. And then your sort of tricky decisions are going to be Goff and JMO. JMO was awesome. The JMO wide receiver 2 overall run for the 3 weeks after Dan Campbell took over play calling was great, but it did come to a halt last week. It came to a halt last week in an insanely offensive game where I think the Lions were just shy of 500 yards and JMO scored 0 fantasy points. It actually cost me a matchup. Unfortunately, I lost by 3 points with JMO in the flex. So to me, he's a sort of tricky decision. I think if you want to start him, it's fine. Good game script, high scoring game. I just personally I would look elsewhere. I'd be more comfortable with guys getting more reliable volume, especially when these next 2 weeks can determine who gets the bye, who gets in the playoffs and who doesn't. It's pretty important to me, right? So just a little gun shy with JMO. I still think it's fine. And at least, if you start him and if he hits, he's probably going to go for 14 to 17 and a half PPR. That's what he was doing with Dan Campbell calling plays. I think that's what he'll still do. But he is a sort of tricky decision because of that flop. And then Jared Goff indoors at home, pretty good bet, but I still think he's a tricky decision. Personally, I would prefer Jordan Love this week.
Yeah, I definitely prefer Jordan Love in a vacuum because this Lions passing defense has just been getting destroyed. They play a lot of man coverage, and the problem when you play a lot of man coverage is when you have wide receivers that can beat you, like
Yeah.
Wan'Dale Robinson. Apparently, they can pop off. So definitely agree there. I would force Jordan Love into your lineups if you can. I know I said that 2 weeks ago and it was lackluster, but really like the spot here. Then for JMO, I haven't moved too much on the player. I feel like between the slow start, then he picked it up like over the past couple weeks. Like he's still just a high variance flex, I think, right?
Yep.
If you need a player in your flex, if you're projected to lose, for example, right, and you need like potentially I don't know. Yeah, like Yanni said, 18 to 20 points, something like that, and you want to take the swing, I think you can, but just be aware with the player. The usage is very there's a lot of variance in that. All right, now we got the second game of Thanksgiving. Usually by like this time of the day when the Cowboys kick off is like when food starts going around. That's what I always associate this game with. So we got the Chiefs in prime time going to Jerry World to play the Cowboys. Huge win last week against the Eagles. They saved Yanni from an 0-5 gambling week and gave him his first head-to-head on the gambling show over me. So, that's okay. That happens sometimes. The Chiefs have an implied team total of 28 points here, and the Cowboys have an implied team total of 24.5 points. Vegas thinks there's going to be a lot of points here, so do I. For the Chiefs, we're going to start Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Rashee Rice. We're going to tricky decision Kareem Hunt and Xavier Worthy, and then we're going to sit the other running backs. Then for the Cowboys, this might be a hot take, but I'm not really sure. Obviously, the Chiefs, great defense, Steve Spagnuolo defense. They're a good unit, but we are starting everyone with full confidence. That is Dak, Javonte Williams, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson. And let's start with the Cowboys first. Listen, what I saw last week against the Philadelphia Eagles defense in that second half, I cannot unsee. That's one of the best defenses going in the NFL right now, and they were able to erase a 21-point deficit, come back to win. Dak played excellent. This has really been like an awesome year for George Pickens. He's like, it's one of the coolest stories. I think he's finally like becoming not potential man anymore. He was always potential man to me in Pittsburgh, and now it's finally like coming to fruition, which is cool. But yeah, we're just gonna start everyone that's relevant here. Dak, I think, is like a mid-range to low-end quarterback one. Javonte Williams, he's like RB2able. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, I think they're both wide receiver ones. If you ask me which one I prefer, it's still CeeDee Lamb. I know that there's like a lot of chatter going around right now about how George Pickens is the real wide receiver one in Dallas. I don't think that's the case, but I think they're both really good wide receivers, right? In a pass happy offense that needs to score a lot because of how pathetic their defense is. And then Jake Ferguson, he's kind of come on in the past couple weeks. Like when CD came back, the volume was not there so much, and he kind of became like a back end tight end one. Now it feels like things have settled a little bit. He's like mid range tight end one, I would say. He's not in the top five, but I think he's pretty close to it. Maybe like my tight end 6 or 7 on the week. Again, this game, I don't think the Chiefs are going to have trouble scoring here. And I think the Cowboys are probably going to be in a negative game script trying to catch up. So I like all of the passing options in this one, despite the pretty tough matchup. We're giving our Cowboys respect here. Then for the Chiefs, this is like this is the matchup you want to aim for fantasy. The Cowboys defense, they have been notoriously bad all year. Obviously, they've gotten, you know what? I want to say they've gotten marginally better since they made the trade
Mhm.
for Quinn and Williams. I believe Yanni had a good stat pre-show that the Cowboys are the number one team against the rush with Quinn and Williams in there. I feel like that's more so who they played and playing in Eagles offense without Lane Johnson, whose rushing
Yeah.
efficiency has been terrible all year. But I still want to say bottom tier defense, but maybe they aren't as trash as they were like say week 5, for example. That being said, though, we have a lot of confidence in the Chiefs offense on this program. So we are starting Mahomes, high end quarterback one this week. Travis Kelce. It's been like the old man renaissance this year. And Rashee Rice, I believe he is the wide receiver 2 or 3 in points per game, something like that. He's been top 5 since he's come back. I know he popped up with the hamstring. Even like near the end of the Colts game, it looked like he might have been able to score on in overtime, and he kind of like slid down. But he got a full practice in on Tuesday. It looks like it's not going to be bothering him, so he's going to be good to go. Tricky decisions. Kareem Hunt just casually came out here with a 30 carry over 100-yard game last week against the
Yeah.
Colts. I at one point I fab dumped for Kareem Hunt. I got my 1 week out of him and I sent him back to the waivers. I said, "Thank you for your service. You can go now."
I
Maybe I
guess
should
me.
have kept him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maybe I should have kept him on the roster. I don't know. He still doesn't look very good to me. Like, he's like a 32-year-old running back who he's just kind of found his way into some volume. It looks like Pacheco's going to be back this week. I don't know. I would assume that the running game kind of goes back to how it was when Pacheco was in there. Maybe it leans a little bit more Kareem Hunt, but we're expecting an inefficient running game, maybe anywhere in the neighborhood of 11 to 15 opportunities for Kareem Hunt, maybe on the bullish side, and then he has the best chance of falling in the end zone. So I think he's like flexible, maybe low end RB2 this week, but you could do worse. Then Xavier Worthy. This was an interesting one because Yanni had him as a start. For those of you who are not aware, in the offseason, Yanni was a huge Rashee Rice guy. I was a huge Xavier Worthy guy. I was the Xavier Worthy bull out of the two of us. And even in this matchup against the number one like fantasy defense you want to start your guys against, with Xavier Worthy getting his best usage of all year last week, I can't call him more than a tricky decision. I pushed back against Yanni and said we got to put him in a tricky decision just because of how it's been. He has not gotten in double digits since week 4, which was his first week back from the shoulder. It seems like what the Chiefs are doing is the emphasis on the offense is on Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce very squarely. But listen, it's a very bad defense. Maybe Mahomes hits like one of those long bombs. And I mean, if Xavier Worthy can get between 6 to 8 targets, I think he's flexible this week. There are some very interesting decisions I'm going to be making on Xavier Worthy rosters this week. I won't reveal them to the public because it's contingent on a couple of things happening, but I think he's at least in consideration to get into your lineup. What do you think, man?
Nothing besides I'm really looking forward to this game. So I have a crazy thing. One, I have Rashee Rice on 7 of my 12 redraft rosters in the free Tendies fantasy league. So I'm excited about that. But 2, on 3 Rashee Rice rosters, I have George Pickens. So I have this game double stacked. And then I have on 2 of those rosters, the George Pickens Dak Prescott stack. So, and actually one of them, I have Travis Kelce as well. So I'm just looking forward to, I hope this thing goes gangbusters. It'll really seal up a big week for me here. So I'm really excited about that. Um, and I don't blame you for being out on Worthy. I mean, it's been really rough this year. I just think that in this sort of matchup, I would roll him.
I'm
So,
not
but
I'm
that's
not
fine.
out on Worthy the player. I'm just out on what the usage has been this year. Whether or not it's the injury he sustained, right? Whether or not it's just Rashee Rice
Interesting.
is that inevitable of a force, I'm
Yep.
not sure. I still like the player though.
Okay, another game that like really will impact my fantasy outcomes this year. It's going to be the Bengals with a 22.25 implied team total going to Baltimore with a 29.25 implied team total. The return of Joe Burrow here. I'm excited to see Joe back. He got the reconstruction that I kind of wish Brock Purdy had gotten. We'll see how it takes. The Ravens side of this is much simpler. I'm aware that Lamar has been really disappointing for the last month. You have not gotten what you paid for since he's been back. He's had an injury every single week, a new injury every single week since he's been back. It's really frustrating. He's not explosive running the ball. He's had his lowest rushing production per game in fantasy in his career this year. Again, this is someone who my fantasy fates are very much tied to. I understand it's been really frustrating. I think you just have to keep starting him because you don't go to the waivers over someone like that. But 2, I do think he'll come around eventually. It's just a matter of when, and we're kind of in a holding pattern. But against the Bengals, yeah, you're going to go ahead and start Lamar, and you're going to feel really good about it. I'm actually really excited about it. Mark Andrews, this is the worst defense in the NFL against tight end. They just get absolutely gashed by tight end. I love Mark Andrews this week. Get him in your lineups. Derrick Henry. Winter Derrick Henry is here, ladies and gentlemen. It's exciting. We saw what he did last week. He's getting like the workhorse usage. And I guess the only bright spot in the Lamar struggling is it seems like Derrick Henry is back to getting that kind of bell cow usage in the red zone specifically. So, yeah, high end RB1 this week. And then Zay Flowers. Man, really frustrating because this was someone who was falling to the late 6th or the 7th round in Yahoo redraft. And I stacked him with Lamar 3 different times. And I felt really good about it the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then he just sort of reverted to what he is, which is this weird yardage eater from in between the 20s, where he just kind of keeps getting games of like 5 receptions for 68 yards, 6 receptions for 57 yards. And like not getting in the end zone. He's not getting the red zone usage, and they've gone back to Lamar and Andrews this year. So I don't really know. Like I feel good about him this week, but d- does that carry over into tougher matchups? I just don't know how much of that is Lamar being healthy. I'm not sure. I am starting him this week where I have him, so I would recommend you guys do the same. It's been a weird, inconsistent ride with Zay Flowers. I think that's just maybe not the type of player he is, but the type of offense he's in. That's You're just going to get this type of production out of him. I don't know why they don't use him like they did the first 2 weeks. He looked tremendous, like one of the best receivers in football for those first 2 or 3 weeks, but he just didn't keep it up. And then for the Bengals, Jamar Chase and Chase Brown, no explanation needed. I know there's been some discussion about the massive splits when P Ryan is in there and when he's not, and it does look like P Ryan's back this week. If Chase Brown all of a sudden goes back to like more like a TD dependent RB2, we'll maybe have a discussion about that. But he has been like a mid range to high end RB1 in the last month. You're going to keep starting him as such. Joe Burrow, topic of discussion between me and Theodore before we got on here. I understand if you guys want to wait a week with Joe Burrow. Please be aware if he's in your IR and he plays tomorrow, it will lock your lineup from adding or dropping players until he is out of your IR and non-questionable. So if you're not going to roll him and he's sitting in your IR, make sure you make whatever transactions you need to make before kickoff tomorrow. I personally think you can go ahead and start him here. I think it's going to be an offensive enough game. I don't think they would start him unless they had to. And I still think even an 85% Joe Burrow that's a little rusty is better than a 100% Joe Flacco, despite what some weird corners of the fantasy community say. And then Mike Gesicki. And Gesicki is on here more so probably as a DFS thing. I don't think you guys are looking at it in a redraft, but tomorrow in DraftKings, you're going to have the 3-game slate, and they're going to ask you to make a lineup for your 3-game slate. Gesicki has a really good track record when T. Higgins is out, as far as his production with specifically Joe Burrow. So if Joe Burrow's reasonably priced, or if you just want a reasonably priced tight end here, because some of these tight ends are going to be pretty pricey tomorrow, they've been really productive. Ferguson, Kelsey. I think Gesicki's a pretty good start in your lineup, but he's a sort of tricky decision for us for a redraft.
Yeah, I got nothing else to add on this one. It really is. I'm just going to be looking to see how Burrow looks, right? I have 40% Chase exposure, Jamar Chase, that is. So if Joe looks good against what has been the number one defense over the past 6 weeks, I'll be over the moon about it, especially for the
Yeah, well, they
playoff
play
push.
again. They play again week 15 too. That'll be your week 1 playoff matchup. So
All right. Next, we have the Black Friday game. I don't know why they decided we're going to start playing football on Black Friday, but I mean, this game I think will be pretty interesting regardless. We got the Bears going to Lincoln Financial to play the Eagles, coming off a tough loss last week. The Bears have an implied team total of 18.75 points, and the Eagles have an implied team total of 25.75 points. I feel like both of these teams this year I've watched a lot of I've watched a lot of their games because I have a lot of fantasy relevant options on both of these teams, and they've been, I think, incredibly frustrating one way or another to be rooting for fantasy guys on. So this will be an interesting one, and we kind of have some weird shit going on here in our call outs. So for the Bears, our only just full blown start for you is Colston Loveland, believe it or not. We're going to sit Caleb Williams, the RB duo of DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. We're sitting DJ Moore as well, who, by the way, outscored Rome Odunze last week. Then we're going to tricky decision Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, a guy that Yanni has been itching to be fantasy relevant. We're going to say that he's at least tricky decisionable this week. Then for the Eagles, we're going to start Jalen Hurts, either Saquon Barkley or Tank Bigsby, depending on who plays. We're going to start AJ Brown as a smash start this week. I'm thrilled about that one. Then Dallas Goedert, also a smash start this week, and then Devontae Smith is going to be a tricky decision if he goes. So let's start with the Eagles first because I think the Bears is a longer conversation, right? I feel like if you get shut out by the Dallas Cowboys in the second half of a football game, your offense is in some type of shit. That's just an inexcusable output for one half
yep.
of like a game, right? The Eagles have shown an inability to play a complete 4 quarters where they're good on offense. That being said, though, we're still starting Jalen Hurts. It seems like with the Eagles' inability to run the ball effectively, it has been more on Jalen on his go balls to just kind of move the chains that way. He presents the rushing upside anytime the Eagles are on the 1 yard line, automatic tush push. He's a high end quarterback one for me this week against a just super banged up defense that wasn't very good to begin with. Then Saquon or Tank. I think Saquon DMP'd, right? Yanni, didn't he
He's
DMP?
been I don't know what they did on Monday when they estimated it, but he's been limited twice this week, and he's been limited off and on for 3 weeks with this thing. So
Okay.
it's just sort of we're just sort of wondering if it's like the DeAndre Swift thing, where he limited with a groin enough times where they finally went, okay, he actually needs a week to get healthy. But I believe he's been limited all week.
Okay. So regardless of who goes, we're gonna start the running back in this game just
Yeah,
because the Bears have been so trash defensively. I don't think they're high end running back ones. Like to me, Saquon at this point is like a mid range, low end RB1. Maybe that's even like optimistic. Some people might even say Saquon's an RB2 at this point. I don't know. It's just the holes haven't been there this year for him, and he has not done a great job of like getting yards after contact, right? Like his stuff rate, I don't have the stuff rate data in front of me, but I'm sure that he has one of the highest stuff rates in the NFL. And Tank Bigsby right now is the PFF #1 overall rated rusher. Whether or not PFF is a dog shit system or not, I'll leave that up for the fans to decide. But if he gets full run, I'm interested in it against the Chicago Bears. I think he's totally RB2able or flexible in that scenario. Then AJ Brown and Goddard, we are just targeting the passing game options against a Bears team that has a trash secondary and banged up secondary. I think Tyreek Stevenson left last week. I don't think he's going to be playing. They're just down. The Bears are down a bunch of bodies. Like if there's going to be startable AJ Brown weeks, this is it. I'm really excited to have him going. I think we're going to get a ceiling week from him. Then Goddard has just been so consistent, so weirdly consistent all year. He's like one of the for whatever reason, the Eagles love drawing up these gadget plays for like Dallas Goddard inside the 5 yard line. I don't know why that's been an emphasis of the offense, but it has been. I don't know if it's a Kevin Patullo thing, but Goddard has been like a tight end one this year. I think he's totally like within like the tight end 5 to 6 ish for me this week. Then Devontae Smith is going to be a tricky decision. He DMP'd on Tuesday and Wednesday. I would assume that he does not go this week. And even if he does go, like he might just be playing banged up. I would much prefer AJ Brown this week to Devontae Smith. But like
yep.
if you need to start someone and he goes, like I guess you could. He just kind of falls to me in that Zay Flowers and JMO like type of receiver that is just high variance inherently based on like what he does for the offense. Then for the Bears, Colston Loveland, quietly his usage has been really, really good over the past 3 weeks. Like he's getting into like tight end one territory. I'm not super bullish on it against the Philadelphia Eagles, but the numbers have been pretty good. Tight end is a tougher position, and his it looks like he's getting more involved in the offense, like without a shadow of a doubt. So I think he's startable here. He's like on the back end of tight end starts for me, but I can see an argument where you go there. Our tricky decisions are Rome Odunze and Luther Burden. So Rome Odunze over the first 4 weeks of the season was the wide receiver 3, and since then he's been the wide receiver 38. And unfortunately, he's going to be matched up against Quinion Mitchell this week, one of the goat corners in the league, one of the best doing it right now. It seems really like a really really hard ask. I would try and force Rome Odunze out of your lineups if you can. To me, he's a flex this week because of his relationship with Caleb and his involvement in the offense. But I think like the most likely outcome, if you had to have me guess a point total, I think he's like 5 to 8 points this week would be my guess in a really brutal matchup. Could be wrong about it. He could pop off. I could see an argument, and that's why he is a tricky decision. Then Luther Burden, he's really overtaken Olamide Zaccheaus in the wide receiver 3 role on the Bears. And I believe he outsnapped Rome Odunze last week. So clearly Ben Johnson has kind of pulled back the curtain on this thing. He's giving Luther Burden more opportunity. That really hasn't manifested itself into these like spike weeks that we're hoping for from Luther Burden, but the usage is good. If Odunze is covered, I feel like especially on those long crossing routes, like he's a fast fella. I feel like that could be a good shout here. I think it's more of a DFS option to me. But if you're really desperate or really like just need a flex this week, Luther Burden might be doable. Then for the sits, Caleb Williams. I don't know. He didn't look that good to me last week. I know he had like 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, or something like that. But I don't know. He's like looked a little weird at points this year, and this Philadelphia defense is just smoking people. If they, they had one bad half against Dak, but Caleb is more of a target plus matchups week type of starter, and then like avoid him in difficult matchups. This is definitely a difficult matchup. Then for the running backs, DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. This one bums me out because I have 40% DeAndre Swift actually, and I traded into DeAndre Swift shares this year, and he's kind of been carrying me since week 5-ish. Um, Issue now with the Bears running backs is they're literally just drive for drive. It's like Rico and Chuba before Dave Canales decided Rico Dowdle was a transcendent talent and needed all of the work. So really what's happening is Swift and Monangai are just cannibalizing each other, and you're just a victim to how that particular drive goes, right? Maybe like last week, Monangai got the longer drives and the more successful drives, so he popped up in the fantasy box score. I saw a lot of people saying Monangai is taking over. No, he's not. No, he's not. This is legitimately like a 50-50 drive for drive type of deal. And the Philadelphia defense is a really good one. Do we want to target 50% of the Bears rushing attack against the Eagles? I would prefer not to. I would look elsewhere. If you were desperate and you held a gun to my head and said, I need to start either Swift or Monangai this week in my flex, who do I go with? I baby prefer Swift just because he gets more of the passing work, but I would look elsewhere. Then DJ Moore, he popped up last week. He actually outscored Rome Dunze last week, and he's had some nice weeks, but the usage has been inconsistent. He's not getting that X receiver role, so he's getting more like scam gadget type of yards. I just feel like this is not the matchup to roll out your DJ Moores, right? We think Caleb has a hard time. We think the Bears offense has a hard time against Philly in Philadelphia. I would just look elsewhere. What do you think, man?
Oh no, you got it pretty well. I do think you guys maybe want to be, if you think you're a contender this year, just on the off chance he pops up, like I've been asking for like 4 or 5 weeks, I would try to stash Burden if you can afford it. And then yeah, just the running backs for Chicago. The schedule gets really hard here coming up, and they're now eating into each other's workload. It's just a shame if one of them got all the work, it's a great situation, but when both of them get half the work, that's where you're going to be left with it.
Swift was getting all the work for a little bit there, until the Cincinnati Bengals game.
Yep.
At which point it switched. These split backfields are fucking killing me this year.
Yep. It's been the theme of the year, man. Okay, so the speaking of split backfields, the Rams, who I think are vying to be the best team in the NFL, the Rams with an implied team total of 28, going to Carolina to face the Panthers with an implied team total of 17.5. The Panthers are now missing two starting members of their secondary, the best two starting members of their secondary. It looks like Horn and the Morig, the guy who punched Juwan Jennings in the balls, they're both not going to be there. So I'm expecting an absolute fucking field day from the Rams here. Because of that, Stafford is a must start for me. I actually deliberated if the Eagles did not have such a primo matchup this week, I would have had a really hard decision between rolling Stafford or Jalen Hurts this week. That's how good of a matchup I think it is for Matt Stafford. But either way, get Stafford in your lineup for sure. Puka, Devontae, Kyron. I know Kyron did not have a good week last week, and I know he's had a few of those. I've said this all year to you guys. When the Rams go up big, they get a lot of Corum. That's just what they do. They're totally comfortable when they go up big in a game running Corum to death. Whenever they have a comfortable lead, they're going to run him. That's what happened last week. That's really all it is. I've seen a lot of panic about Kyron. I think Corum's a must stash because he is the clear bell cow there should Kyron go down. That's that. But in this one, so if you want to say, by the way, that there is some concern about him as a start because Corum's going to eat into his workload because they're going to get up so big. I guess that's reasonable, but I don't think you're ever thinking about sitting Kyron. He's been like a top 12 running back this year. He's just a boring one. He's a boring one that unfortunately has like a very low floor because if they get up enough, they're going to feed Corum. It is what it is. He's a start. And then their tight ends. It's so annoying, man. If Parkinson and the rookie and all these guys, if they could just conglomerate into one tight end, we would have like a high-end tight end 5, tight end 4 weekly guy, but that's not how it works. Your guess is as good as mine, whether it's Ferguson, whether it's Parkinson, before it was Higbee. Who's going to pop off each week? So I'm not really interested in chasing the points when one of them does. I believe Parkinson had a 2-touchdown week last week. So yeah, and then for the Panthers, again, very boring. Tetero McMillan is a volume-based wide receiver too. I know he has been a wide receiver 1 at points this year. I believe after his like 10.5 point game last week, he's more like a wide receiver 2, somewhere in that wide receiver like 14, 15, 16 range. He's just a volume play. The volume was not great last week. He did get interfered with on the big interception. I'm sure you guys saw the row about that on social media. He dropped a really bad pass to kill a drive that probably swung the game. Only caught 2 of his 7 targets. He did get the touchdown. But yeah, that's really all it is. Is I wish we were getting more spike weeks, and we would if it was more quality volume, but it's not. It's Bryce Young volume throwing behind a shaky Panthers O line. So that just makes Tet sort of a boring wide receiver 2 with the downside of being a wide receiver 3 week in and week out. But he is a start here, especially because they're going to have to throw a lot, I think. Your sit is going to be Chuba Hubbard. He's just not getting enough volume, although I do think it's really interesting. Was he just unhealthy when we decided that Rico Dowdle had taken over the backfield? His usage sure ticked up a lot last week. He looked pretty good in the receiving work. It's something to keep an eye on. I saw him dropped in a lot of leagues. I don't think you should do that. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be Dowdle. This is a terrible matchup on the ground. Terrible. I would rather avoid both of these guys this week. Tetaroa, maybe if you have a really, if you just crushed your draft, maybe you can afford to avoid Tetaroa. But I'm just not, I don't feel great about this offense this week. I don't care what Dowdle's been all year to this point. It's just enough that like he didn't go off against the 49ers too, which is pretty weird. Like for how terrible the Niners defense has been, they made them look pretty good. The Panthers offense made the 49ers defense look pretty good. That's a pretty serious red flag for me. So that's kind of where I'm at. I just, to me, this is it's a boilerplate for the Rams, and for the Panthers, it's you're going to roll the running back one in a good matchup, and you're probably starting Tet because he's been a boring flex that hasn't killed you and will occasionally spike week. That's really all there is going on here.
Yeah, very interesting, I think, from the Panthers camp. Rico Dowdle against the Niners averaged over 6 yards a carry, and I think he only got like 9 opportunities.
6. He got 6 carries.
6 carries, and then a couple of like dump offs too. So I think like it was 9 touches or something like that, right? Apparently Dave Canales apologized to the locker room for not running the ball enough, and Rico Dowdle was fielding questions about. He said like, "Oh yeah, Dave Canales, he said sorry about that," and that's really cool because a coach oftentimes won't take accountability like that. I mean, I guess so. If Rico Dowdle was that important to this Panthers, team, that maybe he would get more involved, and you'd look for that going forward. But again, this Rams defense is just savage against the running back. I, I think it's a flex. And we'll see because Chuba is mixing in on a couple of drives. I still think his change of pace until further notice, and Chuba's just a fancy handcuff. But that's kind of where I'm at with that. All right, this is an interesting one. We got the Cardinals going to Tampa to play the banged up Buccaneers. The Cardinals have an applied team total of 20.5 points, and the Bucks have an applied team total of 23 points here. Depending on how things shake out, I will have a bet on this game on the gambling show. For the Cardinals, we're going to start Jacoby Brissett, Trey Benson if he goes, Trey McBride, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Then Michael Wilson. We're going to call him a tricky decision. Really cool last couple weeks for him. Kind of, is it a career breakout? I'm not sure. Then for the Bucks, we have a lot less for you, given the state of their roster. We're still going to start Emeka Egbuka, who I think he's been single digits 5 out of the last 6 fantasy weeks. I have Emeka Egbuka rosters that have been just petering off, like especially in crunch time where I need him. So it has not been fun. We're gonna stick with it though and roll him this week. We're gonna tricky decision Bucky Irving. We trolled you guys last week. I thought Bucky was going to. It turns out it was one more week, but it seems like almost for sure he's going this week. He even spoke to the media about the struggles he was having. So we're going to tricky decision him here, and then we're just going to sit the rest of these guys. And we'll start with Tampa first. Very quick conversation, right? Baker has a sprained AC joint in his non-throwing shoulder. Right now, he's officially questionable to go this week. He missed the walkthrough on Wednesday, though. I don't think Baker's playing in this game. So I think we're going to get Teddy Bridgewater, who was like a high school football coach less than 12 months ago. He looked totally unprepared against the Rams to me. It looked like he didn't want to play football. He was not expecting to play football, and he was there to collect his
Yeah.
paycheck. I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, why am I in the game? So really, like, it's going to be grasping at straws to get some value here. That's why we only like Igbuka, just because he's by far the best player that's healthy right now for the Bucks. Not interested in Chris Godwin, not interested in Tez Johnson here. That those are Baker plays. That's just what it is. And if Baker's not playing and he's not going to be good when he is playing, then it really is just Ibuka. Then Bucky is a tricky decision. Listen, I have rosters that have been waiting for Bucky since week 4, like just patiently waiting, like having to deal with, oh, it's next week, oh, it's next week. It is going to be this week, but it sounds like what the Buck said is he's going to be on a snap count. So I would expect anywhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 snaps in this one. I feel like probably next week would be like hopefully closer to full run Bucky, but
Yep.
he's like a low end RB2 to flex to me this week just based on the reduced workload. Then for the Cardinals, this Tampa defense has been very gettable as long as you do not run directly at Vita Vea. So Jacoby Brissett, he's been averaging like 20 fantasy points a week. Last week, I think he had a low week of 19. He's just been passing a ton. The Cardinals are losing a lot of football games, which is forcing them really to pass to catch up. You know, Brissett's been good. Brissett's just been good. I think he's like a low end quarterback one. Definitely should be rostered. I have one Brissett roster that has 3 quarterbacks on it, and I will not drop him because the team I'm playing this week I think needs a quarterback, and I was like I don't want him to have Jacoby Brissett. So he absolutely needs to be rostered, and I think this could be a good spot for him, especially if the Cardinals get down at any point in the game. Trey Benson. It looks like this is probably the Trey Benson return week as well. Just stay tuned on that. Stay posted. I think he's had 4 straight limited practices. He did have his return from IR window opened up, so it should be any day now. I think it would be this week. And if it is this week, I prefer him much more to the guys they've been rolling out there, like Bam Knight and Michael Carter. He is leaps and bounds talent wise above those guys. There's a reason why he was being drafted everywhere and all like redraft in like the 12th, 11th round. People were like taking their shots on this player being relevant. This is it in a good spot too. I think he's totally flexible this week to RB2able. Trey McBride, we don't even need to have that conversation. I think that at this point he's the clear tight end one. This is coming from a Brock Bowers guide. It's just been too good with Jacoby Brissett. Then Marvin Harrison Jr. We're gonna call him a start. He'll be back from his, what was it, Yanni? A concussion again?
Concussion.
Yep, concussion again. So that type of injury, we're not really expecting him to take a while to get it going, right? He should just be able to step right in. And Jacoby Brissett has been able to feed him the ball more in a plus matchup with a bad Buck secondary. I think he's more of a wide receiver too to me. He's not a top
Mhm.
12 player or anything, but that's totally fine for Marvin Harrison Jr. I would get him in your lineups. Then Michael Wilson. So there was some talk this week from the Cardinals camp talking about how I think Jonathan Gannon said, yeah, like if you have players that make plays, we're going to give them the ball, right? And it seemed like that was directly kind of aimed at Michael Wilson, who before Marvin Harrison went out, like was not involved in the offense at all. I think you could make the argument that Michael Wilson looked better in the X position than Marvin Harrison ever has in his entire career so far. I
Yep.
still prefer Marvin Harrison this week, but I think the Cardinals, with their high passing volume, with better quarterback play, are going to try and get Michael Wilson a little bit more involved here. Desperation flex, I think, is totally on the board. You know, I wouldn't force him into your lineups or anything, but if you have roster decisions you need to make, right? If you're a T. Higgins roster that's not going to have him this week, then I would look at Michael Wilson. I think he's totally fine. What do you think?
Yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, I have 33% roster exposure to Trey Benson. I will be very happy when Benson's back. Bucky's still super high on the rest of the year, just not this week. And then just something we're keeping an eye on because you and I were Emeka Egbuka investors. I am a little bit concerned about the gigantic slot usage from Godwin. That is basically the only place they opted to play him. So what happens is if he's the slot, it's Emeka Egbuka's been taking the X roll, then he gets the rolled coverage, then he gets the bracketed coverage, then he gets the double teams. And they don't have another guy over there to force anything open, like if Mike Evans doesn't get back by the playoffs. So Matt Harmon from Reception Perception was noting this week that he's a little bit worried that teams are going to start to game plan to erase Emeka. Now this week, I don't really it's probably a function of Teddy Bridgewater, whatever shakes out with the production here. But I am a little bit worried as an Emeka Egbuka investor about what that looks like if Chris Godwin fully takes the slot role on. It's just something to keep an eye on. You know, You drafted him late enough that you probably have a few other options on your roster. But yeah, so it's just something to watch going forward. There's nothing you can do about it now. The trade deadline's passed, and I still think he's a good enough player that he'll be productive there, but I did want to flag it while we're having the conversation. Okay, super boring for fantasy. Jaguars going to the Titans. Jaguars with an implied team total of 24. Titans with an implied team total of 17.5. For the Jags, real quick, you have two sort of tricky decisions, Ward and DK. Ward is strictly a super flex flyer because the Jags defense has been a little bit leaky, and Ward quietly, unbeknownst to the national media for the last 3 or 4 weeks, is really playing good football from the pocket. He's making some flashy out of structure plays. I think if you get this guy the right tools around him, he is showing, I mean, in the most adverse circumstances that a first round pick could possibly find. I mean, this is as bad as it gets when you're rolling out with this Titans team. For him to be making plays the way he is, his wide receiver one broke his leg. His running backs are just dead in the water. His offensive line is maybe one of the worst in football. His defense is absolute garbage, and he's out there like slinging it around, getting in shootouts, and pushing some of the best teams in football the last month. Really impressive. Again, me and Ted were big Ward fans. That's why. So, like if you need a super flex flyer this week, I think that's fine. I think he's gonna have to pass a bunch. And then DK, I was pretty surprised. This was a Ted thing when he goes, I'm thinking about flexing DK in a must-win game. And I said, why would you be doing that? And then I went and looked, the last 5 weeks, he's had like multiple wide receiver 1 weeks, a wide receiver 3 week, and then a dud. But that was against Houston. That's pretty good. DK looks like, I don't want to say he's like a guy, but he looks like he is a fantasy relevant option that's producing. And in this matchup with this team, I don't think it's the worst place. So those are your two sort of tricky decisions. For the Jags, we're going to start Trevor Lawrence, ETN, and Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange came right back into this great high volume role. I have this roster that has gone from 1-6 to now 5th place in the league. I have not lost since week 7 with that thing. And week 14, I have Drake May and George Kittle on bye. So since like week 8, I have been storing Brenton Strange on my IR to stream for George Kittle when he comes back on bye. I'm excited about it, man. I had one roster where I had 4 rosters where I lost Tucker Kraft, and I've been struggling for tight end. I went and grabbed Brenton Strange in a couple places. I'm going to roll with him for the rest of the year. Really healthy volume. He's a good football player, dude. This is a good football. This was a guy that I was spot starting or streaming last year. And like this year, I've gotten a few places out of him. He needs to be rostered, and I'm looking forward to him this week. And then ETN continues to get mid-range to high-end RB1 usage. This is something that we're going to keep track of throughout the draft season. The running back for Liam Cohen, the conglomerate of his running back room, gets amongst the 3 best roles in football typically on a weekly basis in terms of red zone usage, in terms of overall usage, in terms of target share. Liam Cohen feeds running backs. We saw it last year with Bucky Irving, and I think ETN is the beneficiary of it this year. He has 2 really bad matchups to finish the year. I do not think this keeps up, but for now, in my opinion, ETN is a low end to mid-range running back 1 on a weekly basis. The takeover did not happen like we all thought it was going to come with Bishal Tutin, even though Bishal Tutin's actually looked really good with his touches as well. He needs to be rostered. For now, keep rolling ETN, enjoy the wins. And then Trevor Lawrence, you start him in soft matchups. This is about as soft of a matchup as it gets. I think he's a great super flex play as your QB2. And then wide receivers. So it does look like Brian Thomas Jr. is back this week. Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas Jr. complement each other wonderfully. Jacoby Myers can take the middle of the field work that Brian Thomas Jr. either mentally or physically just cannot handle this year. And that allows Brian Thomas Jr. to play a true X role. Does that mean he's a sacrificial X? Does that mean that he's basically running decoy routes to get Myers and Parker Washington open? Possibly. But I think since Travis Hunter went out, there's been an issue with not enough threats in this offense. Brenton Strange being back should really help them stay consistent. Jacoby Myers, I think, is a fundamentally sound player. Is he an elite player? Absolutely not. Fundamentally sound football player. And Parker Washington, he's probably just a guy. Excuse me. He's probably just a guy, if I had to say so. But I think he's just a guy plus. Like, I think he's a little bit more than that. She's shown some like real flashes of being a freak athlete, even as far as NFL athletes go. I say all that to say, I'm actually bullish on this wide receiver room potentially being useful in good matchups. I need to see how it shakes out first. And I think primarily this is going to be a run first game. I wouldn't be surprised to see 60% of run plays for the Jaguars here.
Yeah, I totally agree. the Liam Cohen's usage this year of the running back position has been really good. I
Oh,
wonder how much of that is just hiding Trevor Lawrence. Like Trevor Lawrence is just an interception or fumble waiting to happen. I don't think the Jaguars are going to need to like pass heavily in this game, right? ETN is by far my favorite start here. Then yeah, just for the Titans, man. I want to shout out Cam Ward. Like his team is never like in games or even close, but like, down 17, down 14, it just feels like the sandbox for him and the Titans to like just kind of see what they can do. I really like the player. I hope that hopefully the Titans have a decent offseason and can support him a little bit more. I do like a
yep.
lot of what I see from Cam Ward, though. All right, this one's a barn burner. We got the New Orleans Saints going to Miami to play the Dolphins, who are slowly crawling their way towards 500. Is it because they're playing completely trash competition, or have they figured something out? I don't know. The Saints have an implied team total of 18 and a half points in this game, though, and the Dolphins have an implied team total of 24 points. For the Saints, we're going to start Juwan Johnson, Chris Olave, and then Devin Neal, who, fun fact for the free Tendies community, I'm pulling this up so I have this correct. I want the exact figure that I dropped on this guy. I dropped I dropped $56 a fab on Devin Neal this week to start instead of DeAndre Swift. So let's go, buddy. We're starting you. Then tricky decision, Taysom Hill. I don't know. I listen. I pounded the table for Taysom this week. We'll explain why in a second here. And then for the Dolphins, it's just what this team is at this point, right? It's Devon Achane, it is Jalen Waddle, and it is Tua. And let's start with the Dolphins because I feel like it's very simple, right? Saints, not a good football team in any way, shape, or form, right? I think the Saints have not allowed a 100-yard rusher this year somehow. The good news for Devon Achane bag holders is he is the PPR scam as well as the rusher of the football, right? So to me he's an RB1 this week. I'm a guy who hates Devon Achane and everything that he stands for in terms of football. But he's looked pretty good. Like he's getting more success like in the traditional rushing down roles, which is something that really irked me last year about like the guys who were the HN truthers. I was like, you don't understand that this guy runs to a brick wall, right? He's having more success on the traditional run plays this year. I feel like it's worth shouting out. Plus, he's getting that elite like dump off usage too. It's like him and CMC in their own world of like pass catching usage, and then everyone else. Locked and loaded RB1 this week. Then Jalen Waddle, like he's just slowly but surely producing as a low end wide receiver one. I think he's like within the top 10 in points per game or pretty close since Tyreek Hill has gone down. They are just massive beneficiaries of the Mike McDaniel scheme and what he's doing. It's just so concentrated towards Achane and Waddle at this point that they're locked and loaded starts no matter what for me. Then to a tricky decision. Again, not a very good quarterback, but if the Dolphins are going to score points, which I think they will, a lot of that is on in the passing game. I think in desperation you could do it. I would start Tua over guys like I would start him over Trevor Lawrence actually this week. Maybe that's a hot take, but I think that Jags game is going to be very rush heavy. I would start Tua over probably Sam Darnold this week. We'll explain why in a little bit, but I think there are conversations where you can get Tua in there. We're not pounding the table to get him in, but at least on the radar. Then for the Saints, their current iteration of their offense, like with Tyler Shuck, I don't know if it's any better than it was with Spencer Rattler, but what's happening since they traded away Rashid Shaheed is Juwan Johnson has gone back to getting that volume scam that he had for the first 3 weeks. So back end tight end one for me. I think it's fine. A lot of times, like there won't be touchdowns and it'll kind of be like empty calories, but those still count, right? I prefer him more in PPR if that matters at all. Chris Olave, again, he's getting really, really good usage. It's just that it's on the Saints team with bad quarterback play, so it's not a ton of touchdowns and huge like boom weeks. But he's a very good player. I think like Chris Olave at this point is clearly the best Saints offensive player in the building. I think the Saints, like going forward, are going to try and build around Chris Olave, and he's a really nice player. He's like a wide receiver two to flex to me this week in a plus matchup against the Dolphins defense. I understand that like the Dolphins technically are good against the wide receivers, but they're not actually a good secondary. They're not actually a good team. A lot of teams just don't have to pass on them. Is what's happening. And then Devin Neal. Again, this is just the Miami Dolphins defense who just gets destroyed by running backs on a weekly basis for the most part. Alvin Kamara goes down. It looks like Devin Neal is going to be stepping into like a bell cow role for the Saints. How much that bell cow role is worth, I think it's TBD, but he looked nice to me. Plus, he was getting a bunch of dump offs too. I think he got 7 targets last week. I think he's totally RB2able. Like I said, I'm starting him this week over DeAndre Swift. I think that he gets in those conversations. Then the tricky decision, Taysom Hill. He got 10 carries last week. He was getting the red zone work. It amounted to nothing. I think he averaged 2 yards a carry. But against the Miami Dolphins, who are horrible at stopping the run, right? If you need a tight end scam and you want to bet on Taysom Hill falling in the end zone if the Saints get to the 1 yard line, I think he's the most likely guy to do that, right? Again, this is extremely speculative. Understand the floor with this player is absolutely just zero. But I think it might be one of those Taysom Hill scam weeks. You're a scumbag if you do it because he's not really a tight end. But I wanted to flag it just in case there are managers that are just down in the dumps with tight end and desperate and need something. I think it's at least consideration. What do you think, man, about this extremely exciting football game?
Yeah, not a whole lot to add, man. Pretty boring. Among active tight ends, if you don't include Tucker Kraft, Juwan Johnson is the tight end 7 on the year. So, like, he's a very boring start, but I do think you keep rolling him.
I think it says something more about the tight end position than it does Juwan Johnson. But Juwan Johnson's a
It
fine
does.
player.
It does. Okay, Niners with an implied team total of 21. Going to Cleveland with an implied team total of 15.5. I'm really not looking forward to this game as a Niners fan. I think they're totally live to blow it here. And this is a pretty boring one to go through. For the Niners, you start your studs in CMC and Kittle. Normally, we are pretty bullish on Jawan Jennings in terms of when telling you to start him, and same with Ricky Pearsall, and same with Brock Purdy. This is not when you want to start those guys. This is an inclement weather game, or at least it may stop before the game starts, but it's going to be like a wet game. That really has affected Brock over the years, over his career, and he did terribly against Cleveland the last time they went there. I don't want any part of the 49ers here this week besides the two studs, and that's really only because I feel like you have to start. I mean, CMC is not CMC. I would start no matter what. Kittle is more so with the state of tight end. I feel like you have to start him, but even Kittle, I'm pretty nervous about. Like, I'm not expecting a ceiling week, and I'm in a must-win game with Kittle. But yeah, bench the rest of your 49ers, please. Your only two starts are CMC and Kittle. For the Browns, your only start is going to be Quinshon Judkins, coming off a 2-touchdown game. I think he had like 17 or 18 half PPR points last week. The 49ers are very runnable, onable. They are vulnerable to the run. I don't care what they did last week against an anemic Panthers offense. They can be run on, and I expect them to be run on here. Shador, does he look great? Nah, I wouldn't say anything like that. He looks lively, like he's just interesting. He had that rollout play where he threw a big bomb. Clearly his attitude and his mentality kind of spurs the team into something. They looked energetic to me. They looked like they played hard against the Raiders. So, but yeah, I don't know. Judkins running hard. Like, I think Judkins is a great start this week. I actually have a roster of CMC and Judkins, so looking forward to it. Fannin Jr. continues to have a 20% target share on the offense that uses tight ends the most, has the highest expected fantasy points per game to tight end in the NFL. It only amounted to 6 catches for 40 yards last week. So 6 catches for 40 yards is 7 points in fantasy, or it might have been 4 catches for 60 yards. It was one of those two. He got like 7 or 8 points in half PPR last week. I don't really think you need to start Fannin. I don't even know if you really need to roster him depending on what your tight end situation is, but I also don't think it's total trash. Again, the role, the target share, like if somehow Shador really figures it out, I think that's great. The 49ers linebackers are pretty terrible in coverage, and their safeties have been pretty terrible in coverage this year, although they did just have the best game out of the safeties they've had all season. So yeah, I wouldn't go out of your way. To me, the only one I'm really interested in here is Quinshon Judkins. And then the wide receivers remain in fantasy Siberia. They're alternating between you know what? His name is already out of my head. Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders. It's just gross, man. It's not going to be something I target or take any interest in 2025.
Well, let me say this for the Browns wide receivers. With Shador Sanders in there, and let the record show, not a fan. Didn't think he was very good. I was like kind of victory lapping when he dropped to the 5th round of the draft because I was like, it was a thing between me and Yanni. Yanni thought he was a top 10 player. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. And so
I
that
did
was a
not think
nice I
you.
told you so
Hold
from
on,
me.
hold on. Frame the conversation correctly. I did not think he was a top 10 player. I thought he would be drafted top 10.
Yes,
That's not the same
that's
thing.
what
I
I
thought a
meant.
team would
That's what I
take him.
meant.
Yeah, well, I don't want that on my reputation. I did not say Shador Sanders was a top 10 player in the draft. You're killing me.
Well,
But
listen,
go on.
it was nice to have that correct take, right? But what I saw last week against the Raiders, and we'll see if this means jack shit going forward. But Shador was more willing to throw to wide receivers. I think Isaiah Bond had like 80 yards.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if Shador is the Browns starter for the rest of the year, I think it kind of is the stock down arrow on the tight ends and like that their crazy usage because they were getting that crazy usage because Dylan Gabriel could not throw a deep ball, could not throw outside of the numbers. And I think maybe Browns guys could pop up, but if Shador is like trash like he was against the Ravens, right, that I don't think it really matters. But just something to note for the Brownies. I think they're just trying to find their way here. I'm excited to start the 49ers DST this week. I picked up the 49ers DST. I'm starting them instead of the Packers. I'm looking to take advantage of some Shador Sanders this week.
All right. Good luck to you.
Dude, like I I
I
don't
would rather
know.
start.
Would
I'll
you
tell
rather
you
start the
this.
Packers?
I would rather start the Cleveland DSD than the 49ers DSD here.
Well, yeah, sure, right? That the Cleveland DST is definitely a better, but I'm talking like the defenses that
Packers
are on
versus
the
the Lions. No,
wire.
no.
Yeah,
Packers versus the Lions. Absolutely not. But like, would I rather start Philadelphia versus Chicago? Absolutely, Philadelphia. I would rather start Pittsburgh versus the Bills. That's just me.
Pittsburgh versus the Bills. That's a little heady. But okay. Next one. This is a very uninteresting game at this
Yeah.
point in the season, so this will be quick. We have the Falcons with Kirk Cousins going to New York to play the Jets. Falcons have an implied team total of 21 points, and the Jets have an implied team total of 18 and a half points. For those of you bettors, if you can bet a tie in this game, I'm sure that pays out really crazy, and I feel like neither of these teams will deserve to win at the end of the day. So you never know. Might see our second tie of the season. But for the Falcons, our only start for you is Bijan without Kirk Cousins and Drake London in there. Then we'll tricky decision Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts. And then for the Jets, it is just start Breece Hall and no one else matters. I I don't do I have to say anything about the Jets? Like Breece Hall is just a bell cow and he's a good player, but he's on a shitty team. Like so you're looking at anywhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 carries. He's been getting the touchdowns when they're available. It's just when are they available? He's like RB1-2 borderline for the Falcons, Bijan, like just a great talent. So obviously he's going to be an RB1. It feels like his ceiling is not as high as maybe people were drafting. I think in redraft, there's no way Bijan would be the 101 like he was in some draft rooms preseason, but still startable here against a trash team like the Jets. Then Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts, like you're really just scraping the bottom of the barrel for Kirk Cousins points here. To me, Kirk Cousins looks completely cooked. Like the Falcons pulled out a win against the Saints, but it's the Saints, right? The Jets are in the same category of trash as the Saints, but like okay, like I think Darnell Mooney had 4 catches last week. That seems very inconsistent. Kyle Pitts has had volume, but it just hasn't really amounted to much. He's like borderline tight end 1-2. Like, you know, that's really all there is with this game. Not very much to say. Do you have anything on this one, Yanni?
Not really. The two places where I went Bijan over Gibbs will haunt me for the rest of the season, but it is what it is. Too late to undo it.
I never would have gone Gibbs over Bijan in their roles. So I mean,
I had
take
Gibbs 1.03. So I have a shitload of Gibbs because whenever I was the third pick, I was taking Gibbs, but I wish I had been brave enough.
I don't
I
think I've ever seen anyone get as many picks inside of the top 3 as you this offseason.
I happen to get 8 out of 12, I think. I'll go back and look. We'll do it in our year recap video. I think I was in the top three 8 out of 12 times this year. Yeah.
It's insane because it's another year where like premium running back has been objectively the best play, right? So what you're drafting in the top 3, unless you had Jamar Chase fall to 2, like me, right? You're usually
Yep.
walking out of there with one of those guys. So good fantasy
Yep.
season for you.
Okay, Texans at the Colts. Actually, I think a really important game for the Colts here to like, you know, I, we were talking about this team as a Super Bowl contender. And even though the Texans defense is incredible, it's one of the best defenses I've seen take the field in the last decade in the NFL. Like, you kind of need to win this game at home if you're the Colts. And I believe they play the Texans one more time this year. No, was this it? Is it? I don't remember. But like, this is important. This is a huge game for Indianapolis. They went and made the big trade too. Yeah, a lot of stakes here all of a sudden. The Texans with an implied team total of 20, going to the Colts with an implied team total of 24.5. It looks like CJ Stroud is nursing what would be the longest concussion I have ever seen. He's been 4 weeks in concussion protocol, and they're hinting he's still not ready. I wonder if part of that is that Davis Mills has looked pretty competent running the offense, and they would just rather let him take a couple more. Like, if it's not broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If Davis Mills looks okay, they're comfortable. I don't think so though. I do worry. Like, that's a pretty crazy time to exhibit symptoms on that degree to that degree for 4 weeks, where you can't even get to neurological baseline, is like pretty wild. To my recollection, I cannot recall a time that's happened in the NFL. For the Texans, you are starting Nico Collins and Woody Marks. The Colts do give up quite a few points to wide receivers. Nico Collins hasn't been getting the quality of volume from Davis Mills that he would get with CJ Stroud, but he's been getting more volume with Davis Mills than CJ Stroud. I know the Fantasy Guru, fantastic follow on Twitter. If you guys don't follow him, that guy puts in such a ridiculous amount of work just into his Twitter posts. He does the full game preview, full game prediction, and then a full game breakdown. That's every single game. He'll do a paragraph on each team every single week. He'll give the full predictions before each game. Really recommend him as a follow, and just as a fantasy mind, he's really good. He seems to think that Davis Mills is better for Nico Collins than CJ Stroud. I don't know if that's true. That doesn't feel right to me. It's just that classic volume versus quality thing. But either way, the volume should be there in this game script. And also for Woody Marks. Woody Marks hasn't gotten in the end zone. He's had single-digit games 3 of the last 4 weeks here in half PPR, but his role has blown up. He has blown up into like close to a full-blown 70% bell cow. He is getting the majority of the red zone work, and he's got a really soft schedule here toward the end of the season. This one's a little bit tougher, but I think the passing volume should be there. It's been less passing volume with Davis Mills too. That's another thing. But I think the passing volume should be there. He's getting the red zone work. I like Woody Marks this week to have his first double-digit week since I know, it was a few weeks ago. So I think Woody Marks is a fine RB2 start here. Sits are going to be Chubb. Chubb is droppable. Do not roster Chubb. I cut him off all my rosters like 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's done. It's over, Johnny. Gone. Career over, unfortunately. Elite career over. Maybe he'll pop up here and there. One of my all-time favorite fantasy assets. One of my all-time favorite players in the NFL. Because like, he has been good in the time that Ted taught me how to play. 10 years ago, Ted invited me to a fantasy league. He goes, do you know football? Are you stupid? Do you know what fantasy is? I said, I don't know. I drafted Jamal Charles with a torn ACL in like the 4th round. And that was my first year playing fantasy. Since that time, Nick Chubb has been like a cornerstone of fantasy production. So he's like this vaunted player in my mythology of NFL and my time coming up as a fantasy player, which changed the degree to which I was an NFL fan. So it actually really hurts me to say that. I'm not saying that like sarcastically or as a quick throwaway. It's actually a huge bummer. He just finally has sustained too much damage on those knees. He's not the same person he was. And then Jaden Higgins, rookie Jaden Higgins, who's quietly been like a low-end wide receiver too for most of the last month, catching touchdowns left and right. Dude, this guy looks like a good player, as does Jalen Noel, by the way. But Jalen Noel is just not getting enough volume, and he's splitting that slot role with Kirk. But Jaden Higgins needs to be rostered in my view, and I'm kind of bullish for where this thing could go. The Texans have been more than capable of supporting 2 pass catchers when their offensive line was healthier. So there's a question there of, is their offensive line healthy enough to support 2 of them? But like, Jaden and Nico seem to me to be like the combo they're going to work going forward. He's a sort of tricky decision this week. I don't mind him at all in daily fantasy, especially, but please make sure he's rostered. And then for the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren has fallen off a little bit the last 4 weeks. No touchdowns, about 270 yards. But he's still getting pretty good volume in the half PPR and PPR realm. Just not keeping up that high-end tight end 1 pace he was in the beginning of the year. It's pretty normal with rookies. You're going to see a little bit of a dip, and I think defenses have started to key onto him. And then your sits are going to be Danny Dimes, Michael Pittman, and Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, unfortunately, was looking like he was flirting with being a week in, week out plug in play RB or wide receiver two. He had like a really bad week last week. The offense had a bad week. Pittman draws the Stingley Jr. matchup. I'm not looking to target this at all. I'm really not looking to target anything against the Texans at all for the rest of the season. It's just because Jonathan Taylor and Warren have been so good this year. Again, the same thing we said with CMC, right? Like I don't feel good about either of those starts. So I would rather avoid. I think I have to start Pittman in a couple leagues with injuries, and like I'm not going to feel good about that start. And then Danny Dimes, I would look elsewhere for Danny Dimes too. To be entirely honest with you, I don't see a huge gap between Davis Mills against the Colts or Danny Dimes against the Texans this week. That's where I'm at. I would rather start Tua. I would rather start Jordan Love. I would rather start Jared Goff. All these guys that we've discussed, those are all more appealing starts to me than rolling Danny Dimes.
And just to kind of build off that Danny Dimes thing, I'm pulling it up right now, but he did pop up on the injury report this week as well. It
Oh,
is
great.
a lower leg,
Okay.
and he was deemed limited in walkthrough. So you have banged up Danny Dimes going against like one of the best defenses to do it. So
Okay.
like
So it
the
might be
player,
Anthony Richardson. It might be Anthony Richardson time.
oh my God, that would be hype. Anthony Richardson, truther. I think he's probably a bust, but he's one of my favorite players to watch for sure. But yeah, like Danny Dimes going forward rest of the season, but it's just a really hard matchup for him. All right, this one. This is the Sam Darnold revenge game, and unfortunately, Nine will not be making it this week. It's going to be Max Brosmer in the
Wait,
Minnesota
wait, wait. Did,
Vikings.
did you see that tweet that was like, so is Nine also injured or how does that work? It
Jesus
was
Christ.
like, so I saw JJ McCarthy's out. Is Nine also out or does Nine show up to the game without JJ?
That is Listen, the nine thing has got to it's got to be one of the biggest memes of the year. I would say like
Oh,
if we were doing an award show for like biggest memes of the year, I think JJ's like stupid face doing the nine like celebration in the locker room right before he just completely
humiliating.
torpedoed a season, multiple
Humiliating.
like high end fantasy assets. Fuck him. Fuck him. I hope Max Browser does better. But Vikings going to Lumen Field to play the Seahawks. Vikings have an implied team total of 15 points here. They might even go under that, honestly. Very tough ask here going to Seattle. And the Seahawks have an implied team total of 26.5 points. For the Vikings, our only tricky decision for you is Justin Jefferson, and we're sitting everyone else who matters in fantasy. If you don't see a name there like Jalen Naylor or Max Brosmer or Nine, it's because they're not fantasy relevant. It's not because we forgot them. So it is
Yeah,
Aaron
Jordan
Jones.
Mason.
Well, yeah, Jordan Addison, he made the list, right? Like, I mean, I
I,
think
I
he's.
said Jordan Mason.
Oh,
Jordan
Jordan
Mason.
Mason. Yeah,
He's
he's
just a
not on the
handcuff.
list
He's just
either.
a
Yeah.
handcuff now.
Yeah. So sit everyone else. Tricky decision, Justin Jefferson. Then for the Seahawks, we're starting JSN. Yanni, I'm sure he's over the moon about this. We're going to start Ken Walker here, and he has earned his name back out of just the Seattle running back cluster. We're going to sit Sam Darnold, and then we're going to tricky decisions, Zach Charbonnet and AJ Barner. And let's start with the Seahawks first. JSN, it's a no-brainer at this point. His target share is absurd, and the player is really ascended. Yeah, JSN's an elite wide receiver in this league, not just for fantasy but in real life. And because his volume is so good with Sam Darnold, like Yanni called it like I think 2 weeks ago, and I think this is very true. The Seahawks are a one-trick pony, kind of with their passing game, but it's a really good trick with
Yeah.
JSN. So I think JSN is either the fantasy wide receiver one or two this week, depending on how you're feeling about Joe Burrow and standalone Jamar Chase. Ken Walker, his usage has gotten marginally better over the past couple of weeks. I think he's kind of what is the snap share, Yanni? Is Walker up to 60% ish? Is that what it
He
was?
sort of, yeah, he sort of cleared 60%. I'll pull it up right now. The bigger thing is more like his touches really went up the last 2 weeks. So he's been up to 19 opportunities in week 11 and 15 opportunities in week 12 with 3 to 4 targets per game. So they really altered his usage and they've been giving him the passing down work too.
Very
So
important to note, the Seahawks' last two games were against the Cardinals, who they bitch slapped, and the Titans, who that game, like, what was it,
well,
7 points? But
the Rams too.
oh, the Rams too. Okay. But I think the Seahawks probably bitch slapped the Vikings here and Max Brosmer. So it feels like one of those games where they probably run a lot more. Darnold does not throw as much. So we're
Mhm.
sitting Darnold in the revenge game against the Vikings here. I don't think he needs to throw for 300 and 4 touchdowns to make the Vikings feel stupid about their offseason decisions. Then we're going to tricky decisions: Zach Charbonnet and AJ Barner. We already talked about JSN. We already talked about Ken Walker. We already talked about Sam Darnold. We just think that the Seahawks destroy the Vikings and they don't have to throw very much in the second half. Zach
Yep.
Charbonnet, he's just like a fall in the end zone type of fella. The efficiency isn't great. I think you're looking at anywhere between 35, 40% of the touches, and he gets the red zone work. And then AJ Barner, secret like tush push guy for the
Yeah.
Seahawks. So if they get on the 1 yard line, if it's not Charbonnet, it's probably AJ Barner. And also, he's kind of been involved in the offense. He's a decent player. I don't think he's like a top tight end or anything, but in a position that's hard like tight end, I think that in desperation you could roll him here. Then for the Vikings, there's really not much to say. That this what the Vikings are getting out of the quarterback position for the entirety of the year, whether or not it's been nine or Carson Wentz, whatever. It's just this gigantic black hole that is dragging everything relevant into it. We're seeing Justin Jefferson, who produced with guys like Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold. Literally, he's had so many quarterbacks and he has been elite the entire time as a fantasy option. At this point, though, with the way the Vikings offense has been, he's a flex. Like at this point, Justin Jefferson's just like the most talented flex in the world, stuck in a shitty situation. I feel bad, but it is what it is. This Seahawks defense too, with Mike McDonald, are finally taking on to the system. I've had to hear Seahawks fans because we're in the NFC West as Niners fans talk about how great their defense has been for 3 years when they're not really great. They're finally good this year. It finally took very
Yep.
difficult ask from Max Brosmer in his first start ever. Aaron Jones, I'm not interested in that kind of split against a team that stuffs more runs than any other team in the NFL. Jordan Addison doesn't have a shot anymore with JJ McCarthy and this new iteration of Vikings quarterbacks and TJ Hawkinson. Again, the pie's too small, doesn't have a shot. Very talented players. Hopefully, when Mac Jones is a Viking next year, and the Vikings give the Niners a first round to acquire Mac Jones, that maybe these guys will be back, but for the rest of this year, it feels cooked for the old Vikings. What do you think, man? Do you think Max Brosmer outperforms 9 in this game?
Jordan Addison too. I would take Jordan Addison in a 3 for Mac Jones, or just even Jordan Addison
Jordan
one for
Addison's a
one.
very good player. Yeah, he's one of the better wide
Oh,
receiver twos in the league for sure. I
oh,
think.
I'd throw him on the Niners with that route running with Shanahan. Absolutely. Um, so what do I think? Max Brosmer played a lot of college football. I saw some comparisons between him and Brock Purdy this week. Maybe. But so he's at least a well traveled football player that's thrown a lot of balls in college. It's actually very different than JJ McCarthy. Maybe that's all Kevin O'Connell needs. This was a guy who had Jaron Hall slinging the ball. This was a guy who had Nick Mullins slinging the ball. Um, so maybe and to me, I also think for both Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson, it's actually smooth sailing from here on out after this week. Just this week, dude, in Seattle with Max Brosmer, uh, with that defense playing the way they are. And really, it's a function of coaching for me, less so for the players. I just don't want to. I don't want any piece of that. I actually am deciding between starting Kenneth Walker, Justin Jefferson, or Teteroa McMillan, and I'm pretty sure it's now down to Teteroa McMillan or Kenneth Walker. So that's just sort of where we're at. Unfortunately,
Well, I mean,
for
when you say smooth sailing, what does that mean to you?
the matchups are so good that I think we're actually going to get really good production out of for the running backs. Like the running backs for the Vikings have incredible matchups through week 17. Now, not through week 17, up until week 17. And then Justin Jefferson has the single easiest schedule in the NFL from week 14 through 17 for wide receivers. So I actually do think we're going to get maybe some vintage 23 point performances out of Justin Jefferson. And I think we might get some big performances out of Aaron Jones. Maybe that's copium, right? Because I have a couple rosters where they are key pieces in them. But I do think, I mean, those defenses are you have I know you have the Giants in there, you have Washington in there, those sort of matchups. I feel pretty good about them in there. I think this is the last week where we get dud Justin Jefferson, where I'm not willing to start him. So
I just worry that 9 is such a fantasy destroying force that even in the best possible matchup with one
yeah.
of the best wide receivers in the league, that he can't produce with him.
Maybe
I think best case scenario here for the Vikings is Brosmer puts up a scrappy performance and they kind of continue to soft bench JJ. They go with him the rest of the way. Then maybe Jefferson gets there. But for me, like rest of the season, he's like a wide receiver too, which is depressing for that player. But it's just where I'm at with the Vikings as a whole. Really disgusting, man.
Oh, it's such a bummer. Okay, very important game for both of these team seasons. The Buffalo Bills are going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Buffalo with an implied team total of 25, Pittsburgh with an implied team total of 21.5. They did confirm this week they expect Aaron Rodgers to be back. For the Buffalo Bills, again, pretty boilerplate. Kincaid did start limited practices here, so I would assume he goes because why would they? I mean, I don't know. There's been some weird stuff this year actually where guys have stayed limited for like 2 weeks, but that's more been like coming off IR or coming off of a longer rest. Kincaid was never a candidate for IR and he sat 2 weeks. I would assume if he's limited, it's because they're ramping him back up to go. So barring a setback, I do expect him to go. Kincaid was one of the best tight ends in football before he went down. I expect him to be one of the best tight ends in football afterward. And Keon Coleman has since been removed from this offensive rotation. So when you have no Keon Coleman in this offensive rotation and then you're going to have Kincaid come back, I think there's a chance he sees real volume in addition to the red zone role he took on. Like Kincaid might have himself a really nice rest of season here. So Josh Allen, Kincaid, Cook, and Shakir. James Cook, not a whole lot to explain here. Just one of the better running backs in fantasy. Sometimes he doesn't get the touchdown, and that can really affect him. Sometimes they just go away from him. I wish Ty Johnson did not have the third down role that he does, but still, really high end start that you feel great about every week. And then Shakir, the Steelers secondary is very gettable. They are very gettable. They have better corners on the outside and better safeties too. Their slot corner isn't great. Like I'm going to go ahead and roll Khalil Shakir this week with full confidence, expecting a ceiling game. And then Keon Coleman, LOL, is a sit. I don't even know if he'll suit up for the game. Things have gotten that bad. I kind of hope he doesn't, so we just concentrate the offense. But for Josh Allen's sake, I hope he does pretty well. I do have a roster with Josh Allen where I need him to get going. And then for the Steelers, this one's on me if it goes south. I'm going to tell you guys you can start Jalen Warren or Kenny Gainwell. It's because of how soft this defense is. Kenny Gainwell should have the third down role. Jalen Warren is runnable. I like Jalen Warren as a player. I still think he's one of the better players in this league. I know that there's concern over the Kenny Gainwell usage last week. To me, these guys are both like high-end running back threes that you can go ahead and plug in your flex, or if you have a hero RB roster, plug in your RB2 spot. You're totally live to get a touchdown, get 13, 14, 15 half PPR points. Again, I wish it was one or the other, so that way we could have a shot at like a low-end running back 1 week. I just don't know if we're going to get that, or I don't know if it's going to be predictable between the two on any given week who gets there. DK Metcalf, I think he's just a very boring wide receiver 2-3 borderline guy. If he gets the touchdown or has the big play, he's going to be a wide receiver 2. If not, he's more like a wide receiver 3. There's a reason that I had 48 best ball rosters. I took 0 DK Metcalf. In 12 redraft rosters, I took 0 DK Metcalf. I told you guys to trade him multiple times this year. I'm just not a fan of the archetype of a player. And this is coming from maybe I was burnt a little bit, right, from last year, because I was pretty in on DK Metcalf in the mid to late third round last year, and he just really like effed me as the year went on, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. And then your sits are going to be the tight ends. Again, if we knew which one, or if we knew that one was getting all that work, we would tell you to start him, but we can't, we don't, we're not going to. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be Aaron Rodgers. Should be a good volume game. The Bills defense has been pretty trash this year. Should be able to run on them a lot, and then they pass a lot when they get in the red zone. Season on the line, might be Aaron Rodgers' last run here. I expect to see pretty good Aaron Rodgers here, but I think you guys can do a lot better. Like I would much rather start Tua. I'm trying to think of some of the other borderline guys that we've discussed. Certainly
I'd
not
start
Mac.
Trevor instead.
I would start Trevor Lawrence. Absolutely. I would start Jordan Love. I would start Jared Goff over Aaron Rodgers. It's just sort of in that range of stuff. But super flex, you're going to the wire because you just don't have anything. Fine. Aaron's not terrible.
I got nothing on this game other than to just tell the fans this is yet another split backfield that has fucked me. Jalen Warren on one roster has been one of the only guys I took that did not just straight up bust. And now, for whatever reason, Arthur Smith, you know what? It's the most predictable thing in the world. It's Arthur Smith. I don't know why I'm shocked this is happening. But they said, and I quote, we think these guys are pretty interchangeable between Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell. Believe them. But believe them when they say that. I don't know. It's just kind of whoever does better between these two guys this week. It's just kind of who gets in the end zone, in my opinion. I feel like the usage will continue like it did last week. Yeah, no, this one, I actually have massive fantasy bags on this game, like ginormous fantasy bags on this game. We got the Raiders going to SoFi to play the Chargers. The Raiders have an implied team total of 16 points here, and the Chargers have an implied team total of 25.5 points. For the Raiders, our only start for you is Brock Bowers, and then Genty demoted to tricky decision. We'll see how they look with God, what's that guy's name? The new Raiders OC.
Greg Olson.
Greg Olson. Yes, not the announcer Greg Olson, different Greg Olson.
I got
But
so excited, by the way, bro. I thought Greg Olson, because I think he should coach. He's a really sharp guy. I thought he was coming out of the booth to call Raiders offense when I first read it.
different Greg Olson. I would imagine it's got to be better than Chip Kelly though. For the Raiders
Yeah.
going against a struggling Chargers team. Last time we saw them, they got pimp smacked by the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. But they have a 25.5 implied team total. Nothing says a get right game like the Las Vegas Raiders. And for that team, we're starting Justin Herbert, Lad McConkey, Oronde Gadsden, and then Kamani Vidal. We're going to sit Omari and Hampton, and then we're going to tricky decision the other pass catchers in Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston. Let's start with the Raiders first. This is a very easy conversation. Brock Bowers is by far the most talented guy on the Oakland Raiders or Las Vegas Raiders. Sorry. Greg Olson actually calls a bunch of like passes to the tight end. It's like kind of what he's been known for over the past decade. Whenever he has an opportunity to call games, I would assume there's going to be an emphasis this week in probably a negative game script to get Brock Bowers the ball more. He's their best player. Like in the games the Raiders have had success, it's because Brock Bowers has been getting the ball. I still like him this week. He's like my tight end too overall. I know it's the Raiders, so you got to kind of plug your nose, but he's a really good player, man. He's really really good. And then Genty, it's just he gets a bell cow role, but what's that worth when your line is trash? I think that it's fine when you're playing a team with like if the Raiders are playing like the Bengals or the Dolphins or something, I can get into some Genty. In this one though, it feels like the Chargers line is like marginally better. We're mostly tricky decisioning him for the dump offs and the potential to fall in the end zone from the 1 yard line, but he's more like RB2 ish to me. Then for the Chargers, we're just gonna start them here against what should be a trash team in the Raiders. I understand that the Chargers have had high variance all year, right? The Chargers have had these performances where they come out and they look great against good competition, like week one against the Chiefs, right? And then you have 80 passing yards against the Jaguars where Justin Herbert gets pulled midway through the third quarter. So there's a lot of variance here. I feel like part of that has to do with missing two all-pro tackles in Joel and Rashawn Slater. Things get a little squirrely because Justin Herbert just gets crunched every single down. But we're gonna trust the process here. He's had more good games than bad games this year. Herbert has. I feel like you started him here. Lad McConkey as well. Again, he's like in our minds, and I feel like most people's minds at this point, kind of consolidated himself on top of the pecking order if the Chargers are not just completely broken offensively, which I feel like it's a safe bet to say they won't be, then Ladd should be the guy you want to start here from the wide receiver position. Oronde Gadsden, he had like a hot start when everyone like picked him up off of waivers. He's been single digits the past 3 weeks. Part of that is because the offense just completely shit its pants. One game he left injured, but his role is really good within this offense. They're trying to get him the ball. He's getting targets. Tight end is a tougher position. I feel like it should be a good Gadsden week. Spoiler alert, the Chargers going forward, their schedule gets a lot harder than this, so it may be the last time you see a couple of these guys in the start column. Then Kamani Vidal and Omari and Hampton. I want to plant our flag on this, right? Because there's a lot of people that are really excited about Omari and Hampton, guys that have left him on their IR position in their IR spot and are just itching itching to get Omari and Hampton back in their lineups. I'm seeing people. There was actually a really just league ruining trade that went down, and Kamani Vidal was a central piece of that because the manager who traded him said, "Oh well, Hampton's getting his job back. Vidal's going to go back to getting nothing." Right? Let the record show this program does not think that when Omari and Hampton gets back, it will be full run Omari and Hampton. He's coming off the Isaiah Pacheco injury that happened last year. We saw how he looked, and it feels to me like the Chargers came into this season with Omari and Hampton and Najee Harris, and we're totally happy splitting carries with those two. Obviously, Najee shoots his eye out. Some weird stuff happens where Hampton gets bell cow and he looks good for a couple weeks. But with this injury now, number one, we don't think he goes this week. He just had his practice window open. That's different than going. I would assume he doesn't go. So Kamani Vidal for me is an extremely strong start this week. If you have taco managers that drop Kamani Vidal and don't understand what's happening here, go pick up Kamani Vidal. He's gonna, I think, have a really good one here. If Omari and Hampton plays, however, then I think they cannibalize each other, and you can't really start either of them, right? So keep your eyes on the news here. If Hampton goes, start neither. If Hampton does not go, Kamani Vidal right into your lineup as an RB2. Just got to pay attention to the injury reporting there. Then for Keenan Allen and QJ, it's just with the way this Chargers offense has been, which has been rough for the most part since Joel has gone down. There hasn't been much ball. There hasn't been much to go around, right? Like the pie is smaller. They're not scoring. I think this should be a good Chargers matchup. Like they're more tricky decisions to me where you're like, okay, if Herbert doesn't get killed like every time he drops back to pass, these guys are live to score points, but it's just like I'm not forcing them into lineups, right? They're just in consideration, depending on your needs. What do you think, man?
Not a whole lot. I do agree, unfortunately, with Hampton. Dude, he had a high ankle fracture, which means that the ligament in between his two bones and his shin got so fucked up, it pulled a chip off his bone. So, like, when we talk about inefficiency that occurs after a high ankle injury, this was not just a high ankle injury, it was a high ankle fracture and surgical repair. Like, dude, it's really bad. It's really, really bad. Unfortunately, Amari Hampton was one of my favorite players in college. I drafted a lot of Amari Hampton this year. So I would like to cope my way into saying, oh, he's going to come back and he's going to be great. But unfortunately, it's just not this year, and it may not be next year. And we might not see what we saw out of college and him coming back. That injury has altered careers before. So remains to be seen, but I am very, very pessimistic for 2025. I'm treating it like he's an emergency startable guy that I can't really drop, but I'm not expecting anything, unfortunately. Okay, Broncos at the Skins. Broncos with an implied team total of 24.5, going to the Skins with an implied team total of 19. The Skins are rolling out another week of Marcus Mariota. It does look like they're going to have their full receiving core healthy for this one. Chris Rodriguez popped up on the injury report this week, but it didn't sound like anything serious. I would assume he goes. They've said he's the starting running back moving forward. So we'll see what that looks like coming out of a bye week, what adjustments they made. For the Broncos, this one's very easy. You are sitting Evan Ingram because he's not a fantasy relevant player. You should not have Evan Ingram rostered. But Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, and RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey actually did get a 60% plus role with the Broncos last week against the Chiefs, 2 weeks ago against the Chiefs. It just didn't matter because it was against the Chiefs that are one of the hardest matchups in fantasy. This is a cake matchup. Make sure RJ Harvey's in your lineups. He is a must start for me this week. And same with Sutton and Franklin. I know they're eating off each other's plates as far as usage, but I think you can plug them both in. Franklin, frankly, has been outperforming Sutton a little bit. Sutton's fallen more into that range of like a wide receiver 3 for me, where Franklin's like a wide receiver 2-3 borderline guy. But in this one, I do want them both out there. And then Bo Nix, again, like I think he's a smash. And in easy matchups, Bo Nix is a no doubt about it smash play for me. And then for the Skins, we don't really have any starts for you. Your sort of tricky decision is going to be Debo. Against this defense, I'm not starting Terry off a hernia with Marcus Mariota throwing to him. I'm not starting Zach Ertz with Marcus Mariota throwing to him. I'm never starting Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, probably ever again based on the trajectory of his career, but who knows. I'm not starting Jeremy McNichols. And then that leaves us with, Debo Samuel. He's a sort of tricky decision. He's a touchdown dependent wide receiver 3. Like that's it. Maybe he pushes into wide receiver 2 territory with enough volume and a touchdown, but that's what it takes for him to get there, unfortunately. It's gadgety usage. It is a shell of what this offense was. But honestly, I think this year was just sort of doomed from the start. I don't like the roster making decisions they made. They rolled in with a bunch of old dudes. I don't know what the plan was here. I don't know what the vision was here from the Skins, like front office, but I think things crashed in a fairly spectacular way. They're saying that Jaden Daniels is back next week, but I don't know. Who knows, man? That's a pretty gnarly injury to be back in 2 to 3 weeks from. I don't really know what to expect out of them rest of season, and I do know what to expect out of them this week. I want no fucking part of them this week.
Well, let me ask you this because I know that you have been on your cope for certain Redskins players all year. At 3-9, right? Because let's make no mistake, the Redskins are not winning this football game. They're gonna
No.
lose, right? So at 3-9, do you think that they even roll Jaden Daniels rest of season? Like to me, it feels like you would be stupid to get Jaden Daniels back in the game at any point this year. I would punt on this year because Jaden Daniels, if he plays, right, he's been such a great concealer of roster issues for the Redskins,
Yeah.
right? Just because of how great he is. That if he plays, like I think the Redskins all of a sudden become live to win a couple games, and I think the Skins should be like at this point with the lost season trying to just tank a little bit, get some draft capital back, and you protect like by far the most important player on your team. Do you
Yeah.
think that we see any startable weeks from specifically Jaden and Terry going forward, or is this thing just fucking dead?
Startable if they come back. Yes, I think we see startable weeks if they come back. Like, because they play Dallas, they have a couple soft. I think they have a New York Giants matchup in there. So like they have a couple soft matchups, which I think they would be startable if they're both playing in. But would I personally, if I'm the Skins, would I roll Jaden Daniels back out there this year? Absolutely not. You're live to get a top 10 draft pick. You need that with the age of your team. You could maybe even trade out if someone really likes someone and collect a haul there. So I absolutely would not. But I also don't know if that's how the NFL works. We've seen enough examples of that. Guys get paid big money. Quarterbacks are trying to make $250 million on their second contract. It's kind of hard to keep guys off the field. Like sometimes it's as simple as I'm a football player, I'm getting paid to do this, I'm pursuing generational wealth, and I have an opportunity to take the field, I'm doing it. You know? So I just don't know. And remember on the other side of that, you have like the Jeff Bezos group that they're negotiating with. Um, who are probably not the most understanding businessmen. So I don't really know. I mean, that's hard to say, right? Well, I just don't know. Fucking Amazon, dude, with their in-game ads when you're watching the game, it's not enough. It's not enough that they bought the game. They try to get you to click on advertisements while you're watching, and then when I'm trying to watch the fucking boys, the brilliant show, one of my favorite shows on earth, they add commercials to Amazon Prime shows, right? These are shrewd businessmen. So how do they feel about getting nothing out of Terry this year? Essentially nothing. I mean, I think Terry's had 200 receiving yards this year, and like I don't even think he had one touchdown, right? So are they comfortable getting that for $100 million extension? That's really hard to say. That involves knowing what they're thinking, how their inner processes work. Your guess is as good as mine, but I would assume if Jaden is cleared to play physically and if Terry is cleared to play physically, we see them both take the field later this year.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm the irrational one. It just seems so clear to me that Jaden is the
Oh, I
entire
wouldn't.
team for the
Yeah.
Redskins, right?
I agree
Like
with you, dude. I agree. Could you imagine if he goes out there and gets hurt again? Can you imagine if they roll him out there to fuck the team over in draft position and then he gets hurt again?
it would just
Like
be
what the hell?
RG3 all over again, right? Like we've already seen them do this with the quarterback. Like I
Yeah.
don't. Last one of the week, we got the Giants going to New England to play the Patriots. The Giants have an implied team total of 19 points here, and the Patriots have an implied team total of 26.5 points. For the Giants, we're going to start Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Theo Johnson. Then our tricky decisions are going to be Jackson Dart and Wandale Robinson. I think he was like a fantasy wide receiver 1 or 2 last week. Absolutely savage week from Wandale for whatever reason, but he is a tricky decision for us this week. More on that in a minute. Then for the Patriots, we're going to start Drake May, Hunter Henry, Stephon Diggs, and Trevion Henderson. Then we're going to sit Ramondre Stevenson and the other wide receivers. Let's start with the Giants first. This is a very difficult matchup against the New England Patriots. 10-2 New England Patriots, so they've been on a heater all year. Really good against the running back, but for us, Tyrone Tracy is a start because he's just a volume play at this point. I think he had 22 opportunities last week. On a team as crippled and down in the dumps as New York, they needed like basically get any yards they can get offensively, right? And a lot of that has just been running Tyrone Tracy and dump offs to Tyrone Tracy. It is a very difficult matchup against the Patriots, but based on volume alone, I'd expect in the neighborhood of 20 touches this week. I think he's RB2able. I think he's flexible. Even though it's a difficult matchup, I think the role is too good to force sit him. And then for the pass catchers, right? Theo Johnson and Wandale Robinson. Like, obviously, Wandale had the explosion week last week, and he's had other weeks where he randomly just completely pops off, right? So maybe it sounds crazy to call him a tricky decision, but with Jackson Dart in there, it feels like Theo Johnson has been the preferred target to Wandale, and the tight end position is more difficult than the wide receiver position. So that's why we have Theo Johnson as a start, Wandale as a tricky decision. Is that us saying that we think that Theo Johnson outscores Wandale? I don't think so, right? That's the difference between a wide receiver and a tight end, right? Are we saying to sit Wandale? No. Like, I think that there are totally justifiable reasons to get Wandale in your lineup. We just wanted to flag it. Hey, maybe Wandale isn't as locked in elite of a start as you might think after last week. You might be chasing points with Jackson Dart in there. And for Jackson Dart, he is going to be a tricky decision. We're gonna see. We're gonna see how it looks, right? Returning from a concussion, this is a very difficult matchup in the Patriots. What the Giants have sounded like they're telling him is, hey, you need to run less. You need to change the way you're running the football. That's been a lot of the value in Jackson Dart. It's not all of the value because he still throws a really great ball. I think Dart's a fantastic player, but we'll just kind of see how it looks here in a difficult matchup where I think he probably takes off a little bit less. Could be wrong. He could just completely ignore what the organization is saying and try and get a first down because he wants to win football games because he's a dog. But I would prefer to see it first. Where I have the option, I am starting Jordan Love over Jackson Dart this week. So
Yep.
in consideration, but just measure your options, I guess. For the Patriots, this is a great matchup against a terrible Giants defense. Drake May, he's been like a low end quarterback one the past 3 weeks or so. My Drake May rosters have been feeling it. I was used to getting 20 points in my sleep from the quarterback position. Last month, it's been a little bit more rare, right? I have some theories as to why that may be. My guess is that the Patriots are starting to have a more effective running game and getting more touchdowns running the football. And Drake May isn't necessarily needing to be every single touchdown for the New England Patriots. That being said, though, matchups don't get better than this. Drake May is a very good football player. Mike Vrabel clearly trusts him. He's been balling for the majority of the year. He's like a mid-range quarterback one to me, like probably like quarterback 4 or 5 ish if I had to put a number on it. Hunter Henry is going to be a start for us. He's had like a bunch of weird single digit weeks, but then he also popped off for like 20 against the Bengals last week. Really, with Hunter Henry, you're chasing the random weeks where he pops up as like a target earner. He does not always get those games. So if you start Hunter Henry, you need to be okay with getting 3 to 4 fantasy points in half PPR if that's what happens, right? But you also have the upside of him popping off and being like a 15-point fantasy game from your tight end position. You just have to keep that in mind. But the result last week was so good that I feel like you got to start him this week in what should be a good matchup. Stephon Diggs just continues to be the most consistent guy for the Patriots. Again, very easy matchup. He's totally flexible for me this week. He's like between a wide receiver two and flex for me, maybe even higher. He just hasn't really gotten. I don't know. He hasn't like popped off the way maybe I think a lot of people have or were expecting him to potentially do, but he's presents a really high floor for you. I would be starting him here. Then Trevion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson. This is the next part of the equation. Hands I gotta put my hand up. I got this wrong. I thought that Ramondre would come right back to an extremely frustrating level of usage for the Patriots. It looks like Mike Vrabel is more comfortable giving Trevion Henderson the majority of the work here. I would assume that continues, right? I think Henderson got 70% of the running back carries last week. Ramondre did get some goal line. He got stuffed twice, which is really interesting. So I wonder if he'll start losing that as well. I'm not sure. What I know is Trevion Henderson's a way better football player than Ramondre Stevenson, and now he's getting more of the work. So I don't want to chase Ramondre points. I'm comfortable putting Trevion in there. And then for the other wide receivers in the Patriots, it's difficult to tell who it's going to be at any given week, right? I think Kayshon Bouttie's returning. It could be him. Pop Douglas has popped up a couple times. Kyle Williams had the one nice game. I feel like Kyle Williams probably won't be involved though when Kayshon Boutie's in there, but
Yep.
it just feels too inconsistent to try and call that out. So yeah, That's what we got for this one. What do you think, man?
Nothing in particular. I'm actually pretty excited about Tyron Tracy's 3 weeks after this. Like, I'm pretty happy to be holding some Tyron Tracy bags. And I think Dart is going to target him more, especially if he runs less. I think Dart's going to be dumping off quite a bit. Might be interesting to see what the rest of the season holds for Tyron Tracy. I'm absolutely shocked that Wan'Dale Robinson is the wide receiver 20 in points per game this year. He is. He's ahead of guys like Lad McConkey, Devonta Smith. It's wild. Yeah, that's it. Nothing too exciting. I do think Drake May comes around, although I am interested to see my often cited stat about the decline in EPA per play once they lose a left tackle. That is like the most debilitating thing besides losing a quarterback that can happen to an offense. So I'm a little bit concerned about Will Campbell going on the IR, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Do you regret not taking your Giants in the gambling show last week?
I do. That was a great call, man. How God, I was thinking about how much fun that must have been to watch on your end, especially the Jameis receiving
The
touchdown.
Jameis receiving touchdown was so sick, dude. He like
That
broke a
was so
tackle too.
fucking. That was so fucking cool. And like, oh my God, man, I was yelling on my couch. Like, yeah, that was awesome.
Dude, can
So,
you imagine Jameis on the Vikings next year? Fucking
yeah,
sign me up for that. They need to go get him.
yeah, yep, yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us, though. If you made it through the whole video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It helps the channel out. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I'm going to get hard to work here editing the episode and getting it out for 8 o'clock Thanksgiving morning. So if, you know, we're lucky enough to come across your TV screens or whatever, we appreciate it, man. Question of the day for the audience. I feel like it's kind. Wait.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. You had the traditional one. Go ahead.
Oh, what's your favorite Thanksgiving food? I feel
Yeah, that's
like
what
we
I
got to
assumed you
do
were
that
going to do
every
it.
time, right?
Yeah.
For me,
If I
it's very
recall,
easy. It's the
if I recall correctly, yours is sickening. Go on.
what do you think it is?
Isn't it the yams? Wasn't it like
Yes,
the
yes,
oh,
so delicious,
oh
dude. The sweet potato
marshmallow?
casserole with
Right.
so I don't like the marshmallows as much, but get a little brown sugar on top of there, like crusted brown sugar on top of your sweet potato casserole. Oh my God, that mac and cheese by far my favorites. I like turkey, maybe a little overrated, but I don't know. What do you? How about you, Yanni? What's your favorite?
I have never in my life had a Thanksgiving with a casserole or mac and cheese at the table ever. Not once in my 30 plus years. For sure, we do like classic American stuffings, the cornbread and sausage stuffing and the sourdough bread, like softer stuffing. So for sure, stuffings and gravy are my favorite thing on Thanksgiving.
You're not slinging like dolmas out there with the Greek
Don't
family?
listen. No, we actually don't do, no, we actually don't do the Greek shit too often. No, not on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's traditional, and Christmas, absolutely. Christmas, you'll get some weird Greek stuff, spanakopita, taropita, that sort of thing. But no, Thanksgiving, we keep it straight American Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and thanks for watching this year. Next week, at some point, we will ask you guys to disclose with us what your fantasy records are and what you guys are looking at for playoff rate, and if we helped you or not.